Hello again, Internet. Last week, I made a video where that was based on this tweet from Daniel, where he asked, like, has anybody figured out how to use a custom field in the block editor? A lot of people were like, oh, you can use pods or ACF for that. Correct. And like I used to work at pods, but they're both great plugins. And pods has blocks that like can be used in the query loop, and it also does a lot of other things, like add your custom post types, can handle custom tables, custom fields, provide a whole UI. Like, and if you need all that, good. But this is sort of what if we need a very lightweight block, either because that's all we need, or maybe you want to create something that does exactly what you need. You have some special thing you need to do with custom field. So the plugin that I worked on is sort of like a very basic set the value of a field, a custom field with a block, and then show it positionally with the block, right? Like, so we want to use custom fields so we can query against them in the database, but also have like data in the thing. So I made that plugin and posted it. Like I figured like, oh, when I saw this tweet, I can probably make that plugin in an hour or less because I plug in machine and I can sort of get all the setup for the block right away. And all the tricky parts I was just kind of cutting and pasting. So look at part one. The one problem that I had in part one and where I left off was that the block wasn't saved, like because the fields weren't registered server side, the custom fields, which is good, like it's good WordPress versus what you have to say, like, oh, that can be saved by the REST API, which then makes it Gutenberg able to work with that custom field. But I didn't know which fields to register because they're set in the UI. So that was kind of where the last video left off. And I did actually fix this already, but like you don't want to see the two videos of those. Like there's a lot of just me mumbling for it while I figure out some stuff. So I just wanted to show you what I did. The plugin's available on GitHub, and I'll make sure to regenerate the zip file if anybody else wants to try it, or if you want to fork it, do your own thing, or just use the same instructions to build something similar that does exactly what you need. But I want to show you what I did because it's kind of neat. I had said like GitHub Actions are neat. I'm working on a lot of automation for plugin machine to help people like build zip files and ship to WordPress.org or whatever, right? But my theory was that we can save the meta value as a block attribute, and then at post save, we can figure out what that was and then put it, call update post meta. So that was a few steps, and I'll have to link in here. This is a link in the description, but this is the pull request where I made these changes. So I want to show you what I did in this video. This is kind of useful if you're working this way with meta fields. So let's go into I was just starting up the local environment. So all the plugins the plugin machine come with. So do local development, and let's just do yarn build just to make sure that all my CSS and JavaScript's correct in there. So what I did was first, I went into my edit callback for the block, and it used to be, you see this function set meta that I was able to pull from cores use dispatch. Pretty much just did that originally, like that was the update, and it looked good, and then it reset as soon as the post was saved. So I went into my block.js I added a second attribute, field value. And so this text control that if field name, or that's the first one, is set, then it'll let you set the field value. And instead of using the meta, it's now using that attribute. Now, that attribute's going to be saved with the post, but it's not in sync with post meta. Like that can change other ways besides the post header. You could run WP CLI, change the value of a meta field, or use the REST API directly. Plenty of ways to do it. So we want to make sure server side, both in the rendering and in the saving, that we're using the correct value. So I did that, set that up, right? So we had the second attribute. And then I created this function here that takes the post and it tries to find blocks that have the name of my block. And if so, it passes, like for every block that it finds, it runs this callback function. And it was a way to use it twice without like adding classes to this, right? Because I did two things with it. One, this is registering my block, right? And you'll see we're pulling the value. Like this is the render callback. This is how the block is shown. So we're pulling get post meta field name. We're not actually using the field value attribute, right? Because that might be wrong. And then two things here. REST insert post runs whenever the REST API updates or saves a post. And so keep in mind that's the post type. So I think a slightly better version of this would set up for all post types that work with the REST API would add this filter. And so what this is just doing is calling that function, right, this one that we were looking at, and passing it this closure here, which updates the post type, takes the current value, it updates the post meta using field name and post ID, right? So that happens on save, right? And this is the documentation page. You can see this is a right, the type of post, right? And so there's also REST insert page. Right? It's a dynamically named filter. So if you have a custom post type books, it would be REST insert books. So that's cool. And then I also use the same function at block editor REST API preload paths. So the WordPress REST API is used a lot in the block editor for getting and setting data. But one of the sort of patterns that gets done a lot in React that's been avoided here for good reason is that you'll sort of like start loading the page and then you'll see a spinner while it makes a network request, right? Because it just can't render because it hasn't done that. That's a bad UI. And in order to avoid that kind of loading space, right, of having to make that fetch request, blocking, rendering, what WordPress does is it uses PHP calls to create the same JSON as the response. That if like the fetch request was made, and just print it in an inline script. So that way Gutenberg starts up with all of the state that it needs. It doesn't need to make a REST API call back to the database to get the post that it's editing, right? So that's better UI. And so it uses, there's this filter here for controlling that preloading of data. And so I didn't modify, right? It's a filter, so I just returned unmodified this, but you can get the current post being edited from this block editor context that's passed. And so I used that exact same function as before, this handler that goes in, it looks for, right, so if there's no box, just return, no point. It calls has box, which is a core function, and then it calls parse box, which is a core function that returns an array of all your blocks with the attributes. So we say, if block name equals the name we're looking for, get the field value, right, from this attribute, field value, get the field name for the attribute field name. I mean, if we have that, execute this callback. So at save, we were passing it to update post meta. This is when we're before we edit the post. So instead, I'm registering meta. And so that way it'll be able to give the correct meta values to the editor. If not, they'll get cleared out. And then the last step that I did was in order to allow to sync back if, let's say that I saved a post and I set the field's value to 1. And then later on, I went in with WPCLI and changed its value to 2. Next time I open it up in the editor, I want the I want the input to show 2, not 1, right? Like the current value of the meta field, even though the attribute, the WordPress attribute, is going to be wrong because it didn't get updated. So what do? Use effect. Use effect runs when the component first mounts and when anything in this array changes. So I just put anything there. It's a little hack. Not in love, but it works. And basically what we're doing is we're still getting the meta and we're saying set attributes. Like if we have a value for it, just set it. So that way it resets that attribute so it's back in sync with the post meta. And because the post meta can change like somebody else could dispatch the same WP data action here. I use dispatch, edit post. Allows you to set the meta. Somebody else could do it. So this is the way to kind of keep in sync. And I think that it might make sense to use meta dot, the name of the field here, as the dependency. I'll think about it. But let's look in the browser. I believe that I had started the local site. Yeah, here we are. This is a kind of basic block that just, right, we give it a name, beverages, and we say coffee, right? And so it's a nice block and that we can move around positionally. We can put inside of the, query loop probably. And also we can, it's not like a block attribute that you can't really use in your database queries. You can do WP query based on meta performance issue, but often that's what you need. And also like, it'll also show up as a field in the REST API now if you're using that for your React powered front end or whatever. So that's a little bit of more about this. Just wanted to get part 2. I'll link to part 1 in the description. And check out Plugin Machine at pluginmachine.com/subscribe. You can sign up for the email list, subscribe to the YouTube, and like do a free trial of the Plugin Machine. Anyway, thanks for watching.